Hi, I'm Nina Samuels, and apparently you have nothing better to do with your time, so you are listening to the Holy Shoot podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Holy Shoot Wrestling Podcast, a podcast all about the amazing world of professional wrestling. This week we are presenting an interview with Emily and Dann Read from Pro Wrestling Eve. Emily and Dan co-founded Pro Wrestling Eve, the groundbreaking feminist punk-rock wrestling promotion, way back in 2006. It has continuously played a major part in the popularity and increased exposure of the female professional wrestling scene. And I conducted this interview back on the 15th of December, just after their Let's Get Shit-Faced and Scream Into the Void, a Christmas wrestling spectacular, and in the weeks that were running up to the third annual Wrestle Queendom event. I conducted this interview actually for the Women Love Wrestling book. Women Love Wrestling is a book that has been written by a wide variety and diverse group of mainly women and some men from around the world. We've all written this book together to help educate and just grow awareness of how much women enjoy the world of professional wrestling. It includes articles written by journalists, wrestlers, promoters, culture critics, fans, podcasters, and some very clever academics with PhDs that come at it from a very different angle. Hopefully you like this interview. If you'd like to follow up and read the actual written version of this alongside another 300 odd pages of really good wrestling writing, you can find out more at womenlovewrestling.net. And also, you can just look for Women Love Wrestling on Amazon, anywhere in the world that you can get to an Amazon website, and you'd be able to buy the book both in paperback format and also as Kindle. And actually, depending on when you listen to this, the weekend that this interview is being published, it's actually on offer in the UK. We have a special price for the book, so you can look out for it there. If you want to get the digital version, there is a special price. So this interview, as I said, was converted into an article. It touches on a lot of topics. We talked about what exactly is Pro Wrestling Eve and why does it matter. We also went into the training that happens at Eve Academy and how they're encouraging women to be more loud and physical, and also just how training for women is different compared to men, which is something a lot of people don't really consider. We also talk about the history of Pro Wrestling Eve over the last 10 years and the lead up to that recent Wrestle Queendom event, and that includes looking at how and why they've obtained mainstream media attention over the years. We also look at how they've helped wrestlers develop characters with movesets and promos that actually make sense for those particular characters and those women, which have often not been given a chance to develop their own persona when they've been wrestling for other companies. We also talk about just how in general women's wrestling is ignored by a lot of pro wrestling sites, and they also just tell some fun stories about over the last few years working with the likes of Nina Samuels, Charlie Morgan and Cara Noir. So hopefully you'll enjoy this episode. It's a good, enjoyable interview, and yeah, check out the book Women Love Wrestling at womenlovewrestling.net. What is Eve in your words?
Go on, that's you, because you are Eve.
We are a DIY punk company, and that dictates so much of who we are and how we function.
I hate the word company.
I don't know what I
sounds
don't even...
far too fucking.
Yeah.
Like, I fucking hate that.
What it is.
You don't even normally say company.
No, I don't. This is
sadly what you're going to have when it's the day after the show. Yeah.
So we're DIY punk, and really, if you ever look into or know much about the Riot Girl movement, I think that really encompasses how we function and who we are. We are all about providing a platform for three-dimensional and diverse.
Hey, four-dimensional. Fuck it.
women performers. Dan, you're like, do the
like
intro, and
like
then
the
I
fifth,
said, okay,
there's the fifth dimension too, like
fifth
5-dimensional characters.
5-dimensional characters.
That's just what we're up to,
and
right
sometimes
now.
a pug.
And a pug. Yeah, 5 dimensions and a pug coming soon to ITV4.
Oh God, Dan, you fucked me. Right, you do it.
No, you carry on. I can't talk. I'm going on about 5 dimensions and a pug.
Let me bring you back on track. I guess. Why does Eve matter? Why do you think it matters? Why are you putting so much time into it?
One women's match does not show off what women can do. And that's where you end up with people saying, I don't like the women's style. And women aren't being very good wrestlers. It's like, well, that's because you haven't actually seen women wrestle. And on top of that, a lot of the women will struggle to get to that level because when can
Where's
they?
The opportunity?
How can they learn
Where's
and
the
improve?
Yeah.
How can they become veteran level wrestlers if they're doing 1 5-minute match a week?
Yeah, there's more deeper aspects of that as well, because it's like there is so much, like this will regularly happen. It's just like when online someone will say, just because I don't like women's wrestling, that doesn't mean I'm sexist. It's like, if the only reason that if you don't like women's wrestling, if you don't like anything wrestling to do with women, purely because they're women, then that is sexist. And if you was to say I haven't found or I haven't watched any women's wrestling that I've liked, that's not the same thing, because that's saying I watch it, but I haven't found anyone that I like. But you're going to be watching fundamentally, like, so little in comparison to guys, and so many. Especially if you go to live shows, there are so many promoters that don't treat the women with the same respect. Oh, hello. There? I don't know. I went. Okay, cool.
I think you accidentally hit the mute button.
I might have hit the mute button. Were you able to hear me just a moment ago?
Yeah, I was playing around with my mute button just because I was moving, so I don't know if that was what happened. Okay,
no, that's all right. That's all right. I won't panic. So yeah, because like they won't want to spend the money on the women that they spend on the guys, and because the women, the talent are more spread around the country because there's less of them. You may have to spend more on, a person's travel. Maybe they'll need a hotel, or do you know what I mean? Than you would perhaps like to for these promoters. And so they won't. So maybe they'll just book 2 local trainee girls, and the match won't be very good. But because it's the only women's match on the show, that is what a number of people will go away saying, yeah, women's wrestling isn't very good, because they'll be comparing it to the rest of the card. And they'll have some amazing male talent on the show. Women, one of the biggest things is like promoters and trainers don't hold women to the same standard that they hold the men.
Some fans will be.
A lot of fans don't, yeah,
and they don't realise that that's damaging.
Yeah, and a number of that is because some of those fans will enjoy talking to those women, and some of it will be because they find those women hot. And it's them interacting with hot women. That's not all of them, but that's just how it is. So it'd be ignorant to say that. Match. Yeah, they'll say that was a great match. And it's like, it was the shits. What are you on about? And there is subjectivity, but there's no way that they would have watched that if it was 2 guys and said the same thing. And also sometimes, if shit is clearly shit, it's like, and they're like, you could say, oh, maybe they just really like bad wrestling, there's always just like an excuse, but a lot of the time it's just a case of they enjoy interacting with them on social media, or they find a person attractive. But trainers also, a lot of trainers don't train the women or don't give them the same respect, because they'll be like, that's not your job. Your job is to be. Some of them will still have the idea that your job is to be there for the dads. Your job is there to look good. Some of them will be like, maybe the training school's only got one woman, and so they'll say, oh, you'll be the flyer, so you don't need to learn how to take a load of these and how to base for a load of these moves because you'll be the one doing it. Well, what happens when that person gets a booking outside against another woman and they don't know how to take each other's moves because they've never been taught? They've only been taught that the guy's going to lift them, like the satellite DDT.
Oh my God.
Like, how many fucking intergender matches have you seen where, you know, the woman's doing a satellite DDT or a head scissors? And it's like, yeah, because the guy, the person that's, you know, taking the move is the one that's actually doing all the work. They're lifting, they're putting them into position, you know, like, but there's so many women that aren't taught how to actually base and take that move because they're being taught at the training school, well, you'll never need to learn that because you're the smallest one here. It's like, well, you're not training them to be a wrestler here for the rest of their careers. Your job is to train them so that they could go out and be a star around the world and make a career out of it.
So let's touch on training, actually. Now you're talking about that. So Eve has its own training school and it's an all-female class, which is rare in...
Yeah,
females biological. This is, you know, women is, so it's for those who identify as women as well.
Yeah, and that's pretty rare in terms of, I'm aware of WoW does it in the US. You know, the Women of Wrestling, they have an all women's school. You guys have got it. It's kind of rare, whereas most of the time, yeah, you are into gender training, which sort of is a bit of a, so that's like the standard way.
There's a lot of, with Eve Academy, I was actually going to say one of the other important things about Eve is showing strong women and showing diverse women, showing loud women who take up space. It's something, one, it is important for men to see that and to start seeing women differently, but it's also incredibly important for women to see that. It's not something we see in the media. It's not something we're almost shown we're allowed to be. We tend to be shown that we should be timid and quiet and demure. Those are the kind of things that are just in general encouraged towards women. So a main focus when we started Eve Academy, a large focus of it is teaching women how to stand, how to be loud, how to make noise. In wrestling, when you're working, you have to make noise. When you throw clothes on, you should be making noise. When you're taking a move, you're often having to make a loud noise. No, it's women we will have when they start. A large majority of them can't make a loud noise. They can't. Their body, like their brain, will stop them from making a noise.
And that's as simple as just actually screaming, you know, showing pain or anger. It seems like.
A lot of expressions are, if it's seen as maybe it would be an ugly expression or a non-sexy expression, is a struggle to do.
I mean, if you ever watch Joshi, you'll see that.
Yeah, the women are really good. They make noise. They do the facial expressions.
And you watch Western,
they don't so much. And it is, if you look through society, women being raped and sexually assaulted, you'll have people say, well, why didn't they shout out? And I think that's really something to look at. They didn't shout out because a lot of women have been conditioned to not make noise, to the point that even in that situation, they cannot make noise. And in meetings, they might not be taken seriously because they're not able to stand and hold themselves in a way that says they can take charge and that they should be listened to. It's a real sad thing through society, and people don't notice that women have been conditioned to be like that from a very young age. So it does mean that's something that is important to focus on in training, and it's actually made us extremely popular with people who don't actually want to be wrestlers. They want to come and keep fit and work on their confidence, and it's been amazing.
They want to learn to wrestle still, like they learn to wrestle,
like as a hobby, like you go to a dance class,
but
you don't want to be a professional dancer. So we do have a lot of students who love it for that reason, and that's something we're able to focus on that isn't like men who are more naturally rowdy or who do like play fighting and things. You don't really need to focus on it with men when they have that come to them more naturally. Other things, one, you're also giving a safe environment. There can be a lot of groping from men, not accidental, deliberate, when they're training with women, and they know when they come to an all-women's class, they're not going to have that issue. And there are just certain things that women will have to focus on and that men wouldn't. One of the ones, leapfrog, and certain jumps. Another thing that women have been conditioned to do that you wouldn't think of is we're conditioned to keep our legs together, which means a lot of moves women can struggle to. What's the up and over bit in the corner? Is there like a
what, the bandera?
Of,
most people don't know it's called a bandera.
Oh, okay. A lot of women will struggle to do things if they need to have their legs wide for it, because we're so conditioned to keep our legs together. You actually have to work on how to hold your legs for that, and it's something where when you first start to do it as well, you do feel really vulnerable doing this movement that for 20 years you haven't done. For 20 years you've kept your legs together as much as you can, and unless you're having sex, and so now it's suddenly you're in a public place and people are going to be watching you. And if you imagine you've got a load of guys around as well, and suddenly you have to have your legs open, oh my god, that's terrifying. So there's a lot of things with women that you would focus on that men wouldn't have to think about, just like there are a lot of things that men would have to focus on that it's just not relevant to women. It's not stuff that women have needed to work on. Women are a lot better at, when given the chance, having characters and depth. I find the women are really creative and more naturally creative in that area. They also seem to be more naturals are found at working together and supporting each other and have that camaraderie from the beginning, whereas men seem to naturally have more of a competitive side on wanting to be the one that's the best and there, and so they might have to be encouraged in that area, because with wrestling you have to work together. So it's strange, but I think it's really important to just really have an area where you can feel safe and you can flourish and you can focus on the areas that you need to focus on. So I think it gives a better rounded training, and in the areas we can focus in the areas that women typically, obviously everyone's different, but it is areas that women typically struggle in more.
There's a couple of like physical things as well, like when in terms of bumping, in order to bump safer, like women have to bump slightly different to the guys as well, and guys don't know about that. No. You know, there's you have to think about those front bumps as well, because some of those front bumps for some people, chest,
and it is with back bumps. If you have a uterus, if you bump a way that a lot of the men are taught to bump, you actually build up a standard bump, builds up scar tissue in the uterus. Which would mean that then the women will struggle if they want to have children.
Yeah.
That they can really struggle with fertility in it, and it'll take a year or more to really get their uterus back to where it
you can
needs to be.
You can do permanent damage as well.
Or you can do permanent damage, exactly. So it is important on that one to look. It's not that women can't take bumps. It's just they need to land. There's
slightly different.
Like on certain things, guys, if they want to not crush their nuts, there's gonna be ways that they would be.
Because the majority of the trainers in wrestling are men, and they don't know about this.
Also, certain moves are just knowing the fact that a little bit of we can come out with how a woman is built, where it wouldn't happen with a guy. It's nice to have a woman be there and be like, a little bit we might come out.
Yeah.
Wear a pad. It's just, and it's not embarrassing. It's just, if someone jumps and lands on your bladder as a woman, a bit of we can come out. That's standard stuff that can happen to a woman's body. It's not embarrassing. Doesn't mean you've got weak pelvic floor muscles, but it doesn't happen to guys. Then guys could get like a semi in certain situations. Women don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, we've seen that in a couple of matches.
And the thing is, it happens. It's just a biological thing where suddenly you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Only.
And the other thing is with regard specifically to Eve Academy is because Eve doesn't attract just in fact majority of our audience aren't wrestling fans, and a number of them are just Eve fans, And what I mean is by that is because of the amount of things that we've been able to, just get out in mainstream media as opposed to wrestling media. And that means that a number of the women that come to the youth shows will then, some then come on to, some of whom may then come on to Eve Academy. And so we have a number of women in Eve Academy who don't watch any other wrestling. They've never watched wrestling, and they have no interest in watching.
Yeah.
So when the two main trainers of Eve Academy, Greg Burridge and Rhea O'Reilly, and then Nina Samuels as well.
She's often.
Nina takes a lot of them as well, and Cara Noir steps in as well. But what that means is when Greg struggled a little bit with this at first, which he found fascinating, because Greg has been teaching people for, I don't know, 15 years,
long time.
And he teaches people every day, or like his wrestling school is open every day, and so he's and so he what he found surprising, difficult, and a bit of a challenge straight away is he'd be like, so when Roman Reigns does this, or when and he'd say a wrestler's name, or John Cena, he goes, when John Cena does this, and a few of them in the class will go, yep, and a load of them in the class will be like, who's John Cena? So he can't say that, so he has to find a different way of doing it and explain it, because they haven't got a clue. They only know what they see when they come to Eve shows, which is sorry.
And I think, as you guys have done really well getting, I guess, more mainstream press coverage. I think was it Stylist, Time Out, Evening Standard. It seems like there's always something going on particularly in the London press and event scheduling, or just general news coverage, where I'd imagine that's really brought people in. But yeah, they wouldn't.
Yeah, we had, the Telegraph were down there yesterday, and obviously we did BBC Breakfast and the One Show and all these other things.
How we reached out to people. What we do with Eve, I believe very strongly in, not just for providing a really a good night out and a good show and doing storylines that can be completed in one night and enjoyable for one night, but also long term. But the impact it can have on women's lives with seeing these strong women, seeing these loud women, and seeing these diverse women, it's something I believe so strongly in, and that having a safe community to watch any event as well. People should know that, and should be interested and know that this form of entertainment is out there, and know that these type of events are out there. And I want people to understand the love of wrestling, which I got since I was 6 or 7. I've loved wrestling, and I always wanted to be able to invite people into our world and be like you've got movies and you've got theatre, there's also wrestling, and it's wicked. So much of it, the way I wanted to show people what we are, was just me deciding to just embrace that and do that. Show people that they can see these strong women, and show people that they can see this really unique and beautiful type of entertainment, bring them into something new. And I think what kind of added to that, and added to how we reached out to mainstream media more. One, the media obviously liked the product we have, liked how different it was, liked seeing these strong, fierce women that they weren't seeing elsewhere. The other one that helped fuel that is the wrestling press were not interested in covering us. So,
and for the most part still aren't.
And for the most part still aren't. So it was pretty early. We were personally, I just thought, I'll focus on the general media.
Yeah, there's, the fact of the matter is as well, you have to analyze and just be honest. How many full-time, and by full-time I mean, let's say on average twice a month, women's wrestling promotions are there in the Western world?
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
There's one. and it's us. That's it. Why is that? Why is it that, you know, you've got all these other indie companies, and they're able to run a number of shows throughout the year, but an all women's promotion, and this is, like I say, this is not like it's just in the UK or just in the US, in the entire Western world. Why are we the company that runs more shows than anyone else, and by a long way? And the simple fact of the matter is wrestling fans, for the most part, do not go to all women shows, and do not, you know, and this is just how it is, and that'll probably piss some people off, but, you know, we've kind of got the facts to back it up, and they don't.
We did realise that the wrestling world did not want us.
Yeah.
But we were going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So
and that's the factor is, it's like, it's you know, most wrestling fans will not support an all women's product, and the fact of the matter is, you know, that's the reason why we're the only one who runs as frequently as we do, and
we have people who love Eve,
and we get people that realize, and because we don't, you know, just target wrestling fans. This doesn't mean that we're not for wrestling fans. It's not like, you know, Cheryl and Carol are coming to Eve on Saturday night because Meiko Satomura is going to be there. They ain't got Meiko is.
They're just like, God damn, she's good.
You know, exactly. So it's just like, you know, we have these people because we believe in delivering a quality product, and we believe in, you know, helping the talent on the scene grow and get better, and being able to share a ring with, you know, a number of these people, and being in a locker room with them and learn from them. You know, and that's the bottom line. So any women's wrestling promotion that relies solely on wrestling fans, you know, will not be able to run frequently and do well from it.
So I want to go on a point from there. You talked about, you know, like the women that have come through the company and what you've done. So I had to look at, I was trying to remember like all the Eve champions that you've had. So for people that don't know, Eve has been around for like 10 years or so now. I think you're just coming out to that. And I had to have a look and think of some of the champions you've got. And you just talked about how you're the only ones running this all women's show. And so many of the women that have worked with you are now on the major companies. You know, I think Paige was your first champion. There's the alpha male, Jazzy Albert, who's now on NXT UK.
Alpha female.
So the alpha female. So what did I say?
Alpha male.
God, that was Monty Brown, wasn't it? Yeah. God.
A little bit of a difference there.
He's not worked for us.
No, yeah.
He's not worked for you. That would have been a weird show. Yeah. So Nikki Cross, who was then known as Nikki Storm, multiple-time champion. Like you said, Nina Samuels. Kaylee Ray is just like recently moved on to become the UK NXT champion and was at War Games. You got Piper / Viper Niven. There were some big names that everyone now knows from NXT UK and AEW that sort of basically have come through the Eve doors.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was always based on the fact that we recognised talent, we recognised how hard that they were working, and we also recognised that they weren't being really given opportunities to be able to do more than just be the girls' match. And here's the other thing: there is, again, this kind of goes back to like on the training side, is there's a different, you know, imagine you're an actor and you're going to acting class, and they teach you in an acting class. They say, right, we're going to teach you how to be an extra. So okay, that's cool, but I'd quite like to learn everything about acting so that I can, you know, be the star and, you know, have a bigger career. And I'll go, okay, well, you know, we're not going to teach you that. We're going to teach you. Yeah, we're going to teach you, you know, we'll teach you some things, but we're not going to teach you that.
Maybe we'll teach you the mistress role for the affair and the secretary. She'll have some lines. She's not well, you know, how to act like in a song.
We'll teach you to walk across a scene or to sit at a table.
Yeah. You know, that's the equivalent of, you know, what goes on at wrestling schools, because if you're only putting women in a certain position on the show, how are they going to learn how to work a main event style match? How are they going to, and there are differences, you know, in working a match and a structure that's a second match on the card, as opposed to working a match and structure that's the main event. So how is that, how is anyone going to learn that?
So through Eve, we gave them that platform.
They have
and
the ability to learn every
learn
role.
that. So a lot of the women do go on to do these things because they know how to be main eventers.
Yeah, they've
got that confidence. They've got the ability to do that and the skill set.
Now, does that mean that it goes right from the start? Of course not, because nobody else is doing it. Like, we have to fuck up on shows. We have to provide people with an opportunity to fuck up. Because nobody else is really doing it.
Rhea O'Reilly is a great example of we just kept putting the microphone in her hand.
Oh, yeah, she hated it.
And she hated it. And she's cut some, like, very early, some ones where she was almost shaking and so nervous. Had ones where Dan's at ringside kind of feeding her lines.
Oh, there's literally, like, was one promo where I'm holding the microphone to her and I'm feeding her the lines because she's
that nervous. And now we've got someone who's one of the best talkers, wrestlers out there. Full stop.
Yeah, full stop. Regardless, you can just hand her a microphone now and just say, "This has happened. Needs to sort this. Need to fill time for a few minutes." And you could just give her a microphone and off she'll go. And
she'll have the audience. They'll be there. They'll be with her. They'll be listening.
But whereas that's a rarity, because the most thing is when I speak to talent, they'll be like, "How many promos are you cut?" And the majority of the time, the answer I get is none. And because their job isn't to be a part of these long-term stories. Their job is to go out there and have the women's match. And so where is that opportunity to develop that character and find more and learn how to talk? Because there's an art to doing that. It's not as simple as going out. There are words to not use. There are structures to use in your sentences to get out there. It's not as simple as just take a microphone and off you go. There's a lot, and you're dealing with butterflies in the stomach for that first person that's talking. For the first time they're talking, or the 10th time, or even the 100th time, you got to keep going. I'm a big believer in having people learn commentary, because that is an art form and it also helps you as a wrestler if you also learn to do commentary, which again is going to sound weird, and I won't go into all the time to explain all the ins and outs, but people need to be given an opportunity to go out there and do these things, because
and fail.
Learn. You need to have an opportunity to fail, and people aren't really getting that for the most part. So
I just can't imagine Rhea like shaking and being scared, which she seems like such a badass and rounded performer.
She's a badass. That's the thing.
She is as a person, and she always has been as a person. But going up and talking,
you wouldn't suddenly give a junior doctor the just to say, right, you're going to perform this surgery. What? I'm not going to learn it. Well, no one else is giving you an opportunity to learn, so we're just going to get you to do it and see how it goes. And that's effectively how it is in wrestling. They're not being given the opportunity in many places to do it, so just randomly it's like, this surgery's for you, this surgery's on you. What?
Nina Samuels, although she was always confident speaking, her hands used to be shaking so badly to start with, because she'd never done it, and you'd never know. And no one had done it. They haven't had the ability to practice on smaller shows, or just a simple thing where they're talking. It's just, you've kind of just thrown them out there and been like, a lot of what Dan does with Eve is talking to the women, making sure they understand what they're doing, and speaking to them and discussing with them about who they would like to be as a character.
Yeah, because that's another thing.
And then giving them that push through the door, through the curtain, to be like, off you go. Yeah. Boom, you can do it. We got you.
Nina Samuels has a special place in my heart, because I was at Heather Vandenberg's book signing at the gallery, and Nina was helping out behind the bar. So I sort of, when I realised it was her, I asked if she could just record a intro for the podcast I'm a part of, and it was amazing to watch her just flick from being I'm helping out at the bar, fully in character in heel mode, insulting me and everyone listening to the show, and just then switch it back off again. She's so good.
She's another one where
we started calling her the superstar. Dan had that as saying the superstar Nina Samuels, because it was just as Nina Samuels, the character, she's a superstar.
Well, she is another one now that we can just kind of like hand the microphone to, and all you need to say is, "This is what it's about." And off this is what it's about. This is what you're building to. Cool. And and off she'll go. She's another one that's just like just before she went out and cut the promo last night. She pulled me to one side, did the promo to me. I added one bit. That's all I needed to add. One bit, one line. Everything else was just was her, and it was all she had from me is, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going. And she had a few questions as regards to other bits and pieces, because it's always I always work with them, and say I'm big on encouraging them, to Roy Johnson was at the show last night, and he was I love Roy, and he made a point of coming up to me because I said some things on Twitter about him and saying how I want, I'd really like more promoters to work with Roy rather than, forcing him to be their version of him, which is just basically doing that waste man challenge on shows, because Roy's got a ton of potential, but he's not getting the opportunity on shows. And I used to say the same thing about Tom Dawkins when he was doing Car on the Wire at the start. Stop trying to make him what you think he is and work with him. Listen to who he says the character is and work with him. Get their ideas, work with them on programs and stories and understand what they have. And it's the same with with any talent, because ultimately, they need to learn a number of these, who they are themselves. And then you work with them on what the version of that specific character is when they perform for your production.
The biggest thing, the most consistent thing, because Dan does the stories of booking, because it is something, he'll hear me saying, it's something he's incredibly skilled at. It's ridiculous levels. And this is not me as his wife. This is me.
Shut up.
No, I know you did. And then the number of people who tell me within the industry who are well respected. But moving on from that, the thing I have heard the wrestlers we're working with say the most consistently is he'll ask them for more information, like what's your character, and they'll be like, I'm the good guy. I'm peppy. And the number of times that they'd be like, can I get back to you and have a think? Because they will say no one's ever asked me that before. But they're pleased and they're looking. But the number of times it's like, I'm going to have a think.
They'll be told like you shouldn't do this move, and it's just like, well, if you don't know the character, how do you know what moves you should and shouldn't do? Because the moves are a physical catchphrase of the character, and everything's linked together.
Like you'll say to them, why does your character cheat? Why are they doing it?
Does your character cheat because they want to, or does your character cheat because they have to? There's differences in those things. There are so many, and it's like, what's your look? What's your gear like? Okay, so you're wearing ripped jeans and a ripped shirt. Wonderful. Why are you now doing all this technical wrestling? Why, it makes no sense, for you to come in, wearing ripped jeans and a ripped shirt and some Doc Marten boots, and now you're doing a tribute to Johnny Saint. What are you telling the audience? In doing that, it makes no sense. And that's just a basic way. Obviously it goes in more, but it's just easier if I just use the most obvious and basic way of explaining. And it's just things like that. But yeah, the most common thing when I ask that question that I do get back is nobody's ever asked me that before.
Yeah.
And so they haven't really, which is also again comes back to a lot of the training problems, because that means they're not working with them on it. Now it is one of the hardest things to find. When I first worked with Charlie Morgan, I was just at a show that she was at. She was an Eve guest match, because women weren't there. Was a lot of shows when we first started. Most shows didn't have a women's match on, so we actually started buying time on other people's independent shows in exchange for the footage, because we actually started doing an on demand back in like 2011. It just wasn't. It was done as a pay-per match rather than a streaming service. And so we would buy spots on other people's shows in exchange for the footage. We'd provide them with an Eve match. And there was one match on one of Ben Old's Southside shows, and I don't know I can't remember who the original person was, but it was alpha female versus so and so, and that person was last minute wasn't able to do it, and so Ben said there was a girl that lived nearby called Penelope, which was Yasmin Lander's the real name. Of course, she went on to become Charlie Morgan later on, and so this is the first time I met her. And you'll forgive me if you've heard this story before, but I spoke to her afterwards, and after the match, she came up to me for feedback, and I just said, look, I really don't. This would have been about 2012, I think it was. I said, I really don't get Penelope. Like, what is Penelope? And she didn't really have an answer. And at the time, she always says she was kind of like a bit like, it was kind of put her on a back foot, and she got a bit defensive. Which she said was because of the fact that no one's ever, like she knew, it's like she subconsciously knew that this didn't make sense, and she didn't like doing that character. But it was just kind of like, not necessarily just been given to her, but it's just like, this is your name, and now you're going to go out and wrestle, and it's just like, well, now you're just someone doing moves. It doesn't make sense. And that's part of the reason why, like, Charlie Morgan then became, so good, is because she thought about, okay, who do I want to be? What represents elements of who I am in real life, and that I can then, turn into, this character, and go from there. And so yeah, that's always heartbreaking, as well as very frustrating when you're hearing that, no one's working, no one's talking to them about these ideas, because again, their job is to be, the women's match as opposed to anything else.
Okay, moving on to another topic. We touched on it a little bit. I just want to talk about the growth of the company as well. Did you start with, as Heather Vandenberg referred to them, the plastic bag male fans before you grew the female audience? And what has been the impact of things like Glow and the Mae Young Classic and the Horsewomen on just awareness of what you guys do?
Never ever heard anyone mention the Horsewomen before, ever, about regards to any impact on wrestling.
Mae Young Classic, I remember having a couple of wrestlers where people mentioned that they'd seen them on that.
WWE has made no
change to people coming.
No wrestling product or show or promotion has had any impact on anything to do with women's wrestling, at least on our side, ever. Like, the only thing that has had an impact, and it had a massive impact, was Glow. And that did have a massive impact, because
and I also must say, just with the male
it really
fans,
fucks me off when people think that wrestling.
But also the male fans at the beginning, we didn't have anything. What's the plastic bag thing? I don't know if I know what it is.
I remember when I talked to Heather Vandenberg, she talked about some of the independent shows she was doing at the start. It just all seemed to be these same weird men turning up to all. It wasn't just like women's shows, but all like independent wrestling shows.
I don't think
we never had that, because the thing is, as well, is we ran shows in Sudbury, in Ipswich, which are the towns we lived in, and so we were actually just getting families. You'd get a few like hardcore dedicated wrestling fans, but
they're hardcore dedicated
wrestling fans, but they weren't a lot of the majority of the audience at all. It was just yeah, I mean, I think Heather's probably just judging it on what she used to see elsewhere, because Heather was never at any of the early Eve shows.
Oh yeah, that's why I just wondered if Eve had the same thing as other. I don't think it was an Eve question. It was something that I know other companies had, and I wondered if you'd been through that, or if you just never had that, and you had this strong audience that was like growing in terms of women.
No, we didn't have that either. What it was,
we had a family show.
We had a family show. We knew, because when we would try to run all women's shows, we used to get people try to shut the shows down because they'd say that we were no different than porn. And so we would get, people, just general public would they'd see the posters and they'd just complain to the council, and then the council would,
That's terrible.
Yeah, that's what would happen all the time. And what we decided to do, this was back when we was doing all female shows, but not under the Eve brand. So when we relaunched, and we did it all as just us, and and we developed the Eve brand, we made the decision that we were going to have a big sticker on the, a big star on the side of the poster that read "Kids Go Free," because that was our way of basically saying, right, this is not a porn show. This is a wrestling show that just happens to have an all-women cast. And that also encouraged people, because this is when the recession has kicked in, when austerity was being brought in, so money was, difficult for a lot of people. This is at the start of food banks starting to, occur, and so this made that we were a cheap night out for families. So we were worth a risk, and again, because of our belief in having a quality product, we still made a point, and bringing that quality and teaching, and training the women up. We still made a point of bringing talent from overseas, but it was a family audience. They didn't know who these people were. You could have called it All-Star Wrestling Women shows in terms of who the audience was, but it's just that the product was more of your kind of wrestling product that the independent hardcore fans would like, but everyone got into it. Mums, daughters, sons, grandparents, everyone got into it. And we actually drew, there was one of the shows that we did in Sudbury. It was the Wrestle Fever. It was our second pay-per-view. And it was a 300 sellout, turning people away. And we didn't expect that attendance. When we started, we were drawing 100. We didn't expect 300 people, but we built that up. And I just remember we were literally just trying to find other seats. I remember us going the venue part where the wrestling one was up the stairs. I remember us going down into the foyer and bringing up the couch that was in the waiting area. The foyer. People had one. It was just crazy, and it just became standing room only, and and that was in a, it wasn't in a city. It's in a tiny town that no one knows unless you've gone through it. It's on your way to somewhere else, and so that was what our audience was, and at the start, and that was actually really cool. It's the reason why we love doing. We do love doing, the 18 plus shows where we have the attitude that we have. But we really enjoy doing those family shows where you get to see, the difference that you're making to, kids. You're seeing the looks on, young lads' faces because they're seeing, women portrayed in the same way as they're seeing men. But you're seeing the looks on young girls' faces because they're seeing opportunities for them, they're seeing representation of them, because so many superheroes on TV tend to be all male, and so many heroes on TV tend to be male, and now that's not the case at all.
Very similar physique.
Yeah, and so stuff like that really means a lot to us, and especially you'll often get the parents then email us or Instagram us afterwards and tell us about how much of an impact we've had on their kids and how they've gone home and started dressing up and created their own wrestling character, and you're just Jesus.
Mermaid Princess Sparkle is my favorite. That girl's wicked. She made herself a little outfit. There was a cape. There was
character in there.
I love her.
I'd like her to go to some wrestling schools and fucking help teach the trainers on how to create some characters. So yeah, that's how it was when we started out.
That's cool. And I mean, how does it work for you guys now? Because like I say, you run the shows, I look at it and I think, from outside, I think the main way this works is that streaming service and the interest around the world in, finding the people that want women's wrestling and, paying for the streaming service you have. Is that such a big thing, or is it still more about those live shows for you?
No, the on-demand is extremely important to us. Again, that's another reason for bringing in, although we were doing it again kind of like before, but that's another reason for bringing in, some of these names, every wrestling show is a self-contained story, but obviously also part of a longer story arc. And that's where the on-demand comes in. So no, they're one and the same, they work together.
Ability of people around the world to be able to follow and see.
And it's the US and outside the UK does have a horrible habit of kind of ignoring what's going on in the UK. now because of like Progress and, you know, perhaps to a lesser extent Rev Pro, you know, like that's not quite the same. But it certainly is with regards to the women talent.
I think at least from what I see on social media, when you end up going down and finding the right groups of people, there is still a very passionate audience to you guys, like coming out of the US. Some of the women that I talked to on Twitter and Facebook, just from working on the book project, I can see there's clearly it's just finding that audience. But I agree, when you go on the news sites, they're not talking about Eve unless it's like bell to bells. You know, so it's very rare to find it.
Yeah, no, exactly. They don't. That it's like they act like the UK doesn't exist, and you know there'll be promotions who run, you know, I don't know, like 4 times a year, you know, 6 times a year, who'll get like a ton of coverage.
Yeah.
Who don't and who draw like 30 people in the audience. Some of them, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So.
And there we are, doing what we're doing and using the talent, even if we used you know, like we brought Minami Toyota over and no one did anything. We were the first people to bring Meiko Satomura over. You know, start bringing her over, you know, semi-regularly. You know, no one covered. The you know, Emi Sakura's been coming over here for us since 2011. You know, yeah. It's and that's just kind of like how Hikaru Shida was over for us back then as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sakasa Fujimoto, you know, like Kong, you know, has been but there's this a lot of just ignoring a lot of what's going on, you know, in you know, outside kind of like the US. So I
think time.
That's not to say that like everyone's like that, because we do. Some of our most dedicated fans are in the US, and but you know, certainly among wrestling media.
Yeah, I think the first time I sort of noticed it, I think you guys got the attention for Wrestle Queendom because it was such a landmark event, and it wasn't the same level of coverage, but I actually saw coverage was happening.
Yeah, and you know, Mike Sempervive was a big help in that. A number of people actually at the Wrestling Observer website were big helps in that as well. There's there are numerous journalists who follow us and who send stuff into the bigger websites. It's just that they don't they omit a lot of stuff to do with us. So like they'll put something that, you know, some promotions doing, but they'll leave out what we're doing, you know. So because again, the idea, I mean, I remember when that Pro Wrestling Illustrated first started doing like the top 50 women, and I messaged them and I said, you know, did you want to look at any of the E footage? And they said, we're not interested in wrestlers unless they compete in the US. And okay. Fair game then.
You're going to miss out on Eve. You're going to miss out on Stardom. You're going to miss out on a hell of a lot.
Yeah, and I think they you know, when a wrestler would go over to Japan, over to the US, then they'd put them in there. You know, even if they weren't regular, but they weren't interested in anyone. Their whole view was if they don't wrestle in America, they're not. You know, no one cares. So yeah.
So this took Wrestle Queendom though. So I mean, biggest show in 2018 was, you know, Europe's biggest. Was it the biggest ever all women's show? That was the plan then.
Yeah. It was Europe's biggest ever all women's wrestling show.
And so you put in so many legends for that one, including like Aya Kong. Wrestle Queendom 2, you had Jordan Grace and some of the top talent from Japan. You got Wrestle Queendom 3 happening in January. I think you're announcing the card for this either soon, right? I think that's the plan, to announce all the matches.
Well, we've announced Maki Ito and Martina, and we shot a load of angles last night and announced a bunch of matches last night. I mean, like Jordan Grace was a regular for Eve in 2018. You know, so like she started coming over. She was coming over like every other month, and I remember in March she was over twice for us as well. So, you know, Jordan was actually a regular part of the Eve roster in 2018. You know, like she had an amazing match with Viper, a really good match with Livy Grace, Sierra Loxton. You know, like there was, you know, a really good time working with Jordan in 2018. Mako, of course. Again, Mako was a semi-regular for us as well. She did like 6 shows for us throughout 2017. Then leading into Queendom. Aja was the only person at Queendom, the first one that I think we hadn't worked with. Everyone else was all
regulars.
Yeah, like because I think actually Aja and Mako were the only imports on that. Well, no, Emmy as well. But
never count
Emmy's never counted. She's been a semi-regular for us since 2011. You know, like she's wrestled for us. You know, she's been on something like 8 or 9, 10 shows for us this year. You know, like she's been over here a lot throughout this year, and the same was like last year. I mean, she's been regular for us since we did the proper relaunch in 2016 when she came over for us with Minami Toyota. And then again, she came over again like a couple months later with Mako. So,
it is the funny thing, like what we did just now, we do so often, because people will be like, and Emmy Sakura's on the show. It's like, oh yeah, but no, that's Emmy.
I was going to say,
she's not like a feature import. She's Eve.
Yeah, she's part. You know, she's been with us. She's been with us for 8 years.
And you got some new names on this show as well, though, right? So North Phoenix Diana is a pretty interesting one for you guys to have.
Yeah, we got there's 3, you know, people that we've got coming over for it, which is Maki Ito, North Phoenix Diana, and Yuka Sakazaki. And it's exciting, you know, to be able to work with some new talent there. And, you know, again, I can also honestly say nothing but the highest praise of dealing with the DDT Tokyo Joshi Pro people. They've been an absolute joy and a pleasure to work with. So easy. And I'm really excited to be able to, you know, enjoy with everyone else, you know, the matches that, you know, they perform in at Queendom.
And when it comes to like putting together the Queendom show, what's the influence in like who you bring in for these shows? Because it sounds like from what you're saying, it's more, you know, there's the hardcore fans that want to see these, I guess, the imports coming over, but then, you know, you've got your Eve fans that are going to just be there because they know it's going to be a great show.
The imports don't really sell a lot of tickets. I know people don't always struggle at, but they don't. And that's not the reason why we bring them over. There'll be some people that hear me say that and they'll go, well, I bought a ticket for that. It's like, yeah, but you're a very small number of people. It doesn't mean we don't appreciate, because of course we do. You know, we want you to buy the ticket and come and enjoy it. We, you know, part of the thing is about us offering, you know, fans the opportunity to come and see people that they wouldn't normally get to see as well.
I also have a big thing where it might be that person only really follows Joshi wrestling. And I love that they'll come to Eve for that wrestler that they're watching and excited to see. And then they'll see the other performers. And the number of times it'll be like, I came there to see this wrestler, but oh my God, these Eve regulars. Like, oh my God.
Well, I think Wrestle Queendom 2 is a prime example of that, where there was, you know, a number of people that watched because of, you know, there'd have been a number of people that watched because of Stardom, but the best match of the night at Wrestle Queendom 2 was Laura Di Matteo and Jordan Grace.
Yeah.
You know, and by a long way as well. No disrespect to anyone else on the show, but it really was.
They just stole
the show and then some. And, you know, and that's a show that had, you know, Kaylee and Viper in the main event knocking it out the park, you know?
Yeah. That's not a knock on saying the other matches were bad.
It's just that Laura and Jordan was that freaking good.
You just sometimes
I enjoyed all the Undead Brides. That was a moment as well. So.
Exactly, Martina and Sue Young just damn near killed themselves. You know, you know, it was a spectacle.
I love introducing wrestling fans to wrestlers that they might not be
but the thing
as
is that,
aware of.
But there's, you know, again, like the first Wrestle Queendom was a moment. And then there was this idea, you know, that from wrestling fans that we started in, and from wrestlers, we're literally just getting, okay, you've done it now, so you don't need to keep doing it. Like, you don't need to keep going on about
almost like Eve should stop.
Yeah, it was very much like,
like,
you know, stop now.
They're done now.
You don't need to do it. And
it's the most bizarre reaction to a successful show I've ever seen.
And it's even now with Wrestle Queendom 3, there'll be some people that are like, it feels like it's normal. Yeah, because it's the third one. It doesn't mean that how's a good example? We'll put it this way. And fair due to WWE on this. Wrestle Queendom 3 is the day before Takeover, and it is 6 days before tapings. WWE have a rule that no talent are allowed to work shows within the 7 day of there being NXT shows. However, Ginny, Nina Samuels, and one other person, I don't know if it's public, so I can't say. I won't say, and somebody else that hasn't been announced for a match from WWE that were contracted to WWE will be appearing at Wrestle Queendom. Now, think about that and think about how much that therefore must mean to the talent. They've put their neck on the line to say, we want to do this. This means a lot to us. So I just think that you find some. I just think that there's always going to be like a sector of wrestling fans because they don't understand the difference of what it's like for the women in the wrestling scene, as opposed to what all these other wrestling shows are doing and what all these other wrestling shows are like. And it's no disrespect to those other promotions. They, that's their business. But Wrestle Queendom is special for us, and the fact that it's regular now, being once a year, is what makes it special. Because WWE did that one show, Evolution, yeah. How was Evolution 2?
Yeah, where's that got to? Where's the Mae Young Classic got to?
Like at least Mae Young Classic has been. They've done that twice. Where's Evolution? Where's the main one? Where's all these other? A number of promotions have tried doing. We're going to do an all women's show, and then it maybe doesn't go quite to plan, or they're just like, right, we've done one now. You know what I mean? Where's your follow up? What are you doing? Well, again, it comes down to the opportunities, and it meant a lot to us. And again, we're extremely grateful to WWE for allowing, and for making that understanding, and that how much doing this means, to everyone, to us, So Nina Samuels versus Ginny is happening at Wrestle Queendom 3. I'm extremely excited about that match, and it's the first time they've ever told this story with these versions of the characters. Sorry, you can hear one of our dogs is she's like a babe, just jumped up onto Emily's lap.
So I'm just happy we've got through this conversation, because normally when I'm doing an interview, my cat comes into the room and either meows at me or gets in her tray in the corner and starts kicking things around everywhere. So I'm used to interruptions.
Decided if your cat's not going to cause some issues, then our dog will.
She is a chatty girl, so if she howls,
well, apologies.
We've literally had it where I've just asked someone a question and then my cat has gone meow in the background because she likes to howl a bit as well, and it's like that's not the person.
know that feeling. Yeah. They can Skype with each other.
She loves cats.
She does. She does love cats.
Her best friend when we go on walks is a crow.
Yeah. She's
a friendly girl.
Yeah, she is. Where was it? So like because again, like the fact that we have become normal, the fact that an all women's promotion has become normal and regular is actually what makes Eve special, because no one else is. So yeah.
Well, to wrap this up, so what is next for Eve? Now that Wrestle Queendom's like a normal thing, what's next on the radar? What's going on in 2020? What are the big?
It's like a normal thing, but it's still like our WrestleMania. It's still big.
I'm looking forward to it.
And I'm really excited about the new venue, 229. Really excited about it. It's a great venue. Like, love it.
I love that they're connected to a charity.
Yeah.
Wow, that really
matches us.
It matches us.
In 2020, we've obviously got 10-year anniversary. So
which is really special.
Yeah.
And I love as well that we started around the 9-year anniversary. The girls were starting to talk about the 10-year anniversary and how excited they were, and it means so much to them. We've got the other dog starting.
Yeah, the
to
other
talk
dog
now.
starting.
I could just hear in the background.
Yeah, she's jealous because the other dog is wanting fusses. Emily, maybe put Pond down so that the two of them don't. Yeah, because otherwise, Emily, put the dog down.
Here, Ace, you join in the cuddle.
No.
That's what's going to happen. Move your leg.
Oh.
Come on, Ace. There, see?
Well, this is going to go well.
Oi,
there you go.
Don't tell off your sister.
So, hold on. This is...
I'm not pushing them off.
All right.
They want a cuddle.
They want cuddles. They can get cuddles in a couple of minutes. So we've got 10-year anniversary next year. We've also got Eve 100 near the end of next year as well. So it's 2020 is a really important year. It will probably be my last year. Specifically just me. That doesn't mean Eve, but specifically just me. 2020 is a big important year for us. So it's I'm really excited about this year. It's a big year. So and we got 3 major shows with Eve 100, Wrestle Queendom 3, and 10-year anniversary, plus She Won, which is just, if you've never done, everyone needs to do She Won. All wrestling fans need to do She Won. She Won is a full weekend. It's a grueling tournament as well. Like, those women pushed themselves. Like, you want to believe. There's a reason why. Like you start off with 3 blocks of 4 at the start of the weekend, and then we had 3 replacements this year throughout the weekend.
We almost need to announce the seconds. So were there.
Yeah. Which is really difficult from a booking perspective.
Just in case,
so it was She Won is great. So but the thing is I don't like talking as well like the other shows or lesser shows. But no show is booked as though it's not important. I think because of how we have Raws that lead to pay-per-views and whatnot, I think we have this habit that if it's not the big one, then it's not a big important show. When that couldn't be further from the case. Like last night, the tag team titles changed. It was on a one of our regular Resgal shows, for example, where Kaylee won the Eve title from Nina Samuels. This wasn't, like on a pay-per-view equivalent. Do you know what I mean? So every show to us is a major show. Every show to us, the job is to go out there and give people the best show you physically can, not to just help you get from A to B,
or just have 6 or 7 feature women wrestling matches in a row.
Yeah, that is not what Eve is about. And and by the way, on one of those other questions that you asked, no, Eve does not stand for Energy, Victory, Excellence. That was us. That was us taking the piss out of everyone being like, oh, it's got to have some sort of deep and whatnot.
Well, one time we did everyone synced women-wise, and we were everyone's very emotional. We had it that it was everyone's very emotional because we were all very emotional.
That was a hell of a show.
There was a beautiful moment where
Rhea was talking about that show again last night.
Everyone realised it was the first day of their period, and it was like, oh, this all makes so much more sense. And it was like this moment where everyone's like rattiness and over emotional moments just were suddenly like, oh, let's share our painkillers and chocolate.
I think I got that from Wikipedia. As in my notes here, Eve stands for Energy, Victory, and Excellence. I don't think it does, but I had that as a note to ask you about.
We were just like looking for. We had it. What it was is, again, it's just like this whole thing of, at the time, if you're in wrestling, has to be very serious, and what is the? And so we were like, all right, well, Eve, that's not where Eve comes from. So we're just like, what the hell could Eve stand for? So we were just like, well,
Energy,
V could be victory, E could be excellence. And that first one, we just gave up. We just went energy. That sounds as though like we've got some sort of deep meaning behind us, I some sort of
vaguely Japanese.
Yeah, like we were
I was thinking like war. You like wrestle and romance. I was thinking that you come for some silly name like that with it. And
yeah, that was kind of it's funny you say that, right? Because it was kind of that. I think that was one of my kind of like it's like this. I think I even used war as like one of the like ridiculous, likenesses of it all,
we like to have a lot of likeness as well, especially when we're covering like a lot of feminist issues. One, the shows are still amazing shows where we're not trying to just push our feminist agenda at people.
Yeah, everyone's always like, oh, Eve's just too political. I think we've done one thing political, and that was this year, and that was the just with the general election that's just gone past, and even then we didn't do a lot.
No, but a lot of what we do when you look at things is we are about fun, a lot of fun, and a lot of things I do purely because they amuse me. I think someone made a comment that they didn't like she being shoved into names. They felt it was a bit cheesy,
which was the fucking purpose.
Which was the purpose. It was then I was like, can I do an entire year of shows where she is jammed into everything? We never got to do this time.
Ace, you're fucking the interview.
We never got to do this time. It's serious.
Oh my god,
it's serious. Oh, I love that.
That was my favourite, and we never got to
this time it's serious, isn't it?
We did have some shows where they were actually serious, and therefore we couldn't put this time. It's serious.
Yeah.
We're like, oh.
Yeah, like there's a lot of the time we're kind of like just amusing ourselves or like amusing other men, amusing the roster. There's a lot of that goes on.
Like Babes with the Power.
That was all because everyone loves Labyrinth. All the girls were like last night after the show.
The Weirdos is the Craft because
even the Weirdos missed it. Oh god, I remember the girls popped when you suggested that name backstage.
Yeah. You'd have to do. Surely you can't be serious.
That'll probably happen at some point. The
Badass Pictures from Mars is because I thought it sounded cool, and I loved how many people like that was literally it. I was like, oh, that just sounds fun. That just sounds really cool, and odd. And I love how many people that's their favourite show title was Badass Pictures from Mars.
Yeah,
because I wanted Badass Pictures, and I was like, from Mars. It should be from Mars.
And I was just like, yeah, it's kind of like Biker Mice from Mars, isn't it?
Exactly.
So there's that's just all that. I never stood for energy victory. That's just us fucking around. I think there was a few of your questions that you put on here, and I was just like, what? Like that's why I was glad you sent them, because I was just like,
I don't remember that.
I don't, like it really was like that.
We like to have a fun.
Yeah, like it really is like
and fun. Serious.
Hey you, if you like the podcast, then remember to like the Holy Shoot Wrestling Podcast on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Holy Shoot Pod. Do it now!